Hey, what's up guys? UrAvgWarGamer is back with another video of World of Warships, and in this video I'm going to be taking a look at the research bureau ship that you as a player pick first among a lot of other research bureau ships that you might find in the research bureau section. Some of the players, maybe the new players who have not researched 5 tech tree lines, they might not even able to see that research bureau section. So first of all, if you are a newer player, grind out 5 tech tree lines first, like for example the case of Yamato, Montana, GK, Shimakaze, or maybe a cruiser line that you prefer, and afterwards you will be seeing the research bureau section. So just like we have talked about your first coal ship to pick at tier 9 because you earn a lot of credits per battle, we only going to focus this time tier 10 ships, because if you have researched 5 ships for yourself, I know that you already have gotten your first coal ship, and this should be your next plan and move forward to get your research bureau ship today, or maybe sometime when you have decided to pick one. So by the way, if you find the video useful and informative, be sure to hit a like and subscribe, because I make daily World of Warship videos, give you a lot of valuable information so that you keep updated with everything related to this game. So that would be very nice. I really love if you do support me like this by subscribing. And let's go to the research bureau area and see what do we have in the ship section. Okay, so as you can see, we do have a lot of ships out there, like for example the Slava, the Ocean. This is by the way the new and also the first tier 10 aircraft carrier that they have added, which is Ocean. We will talk about this, but there are some very interesting and notable picks that I would say: Ohio, Hull, and also the Brennus, Sicilia, Gibraltar. There are a lot of tier 10 ships, and even the destroyers, and also some of them are very competitive. So among all of these choices, which should be your first ship? Okay, now I will try to explain for each class one ship to pick. And obviously I have showed you that Ohio, and I think among all the battleships that are currently available in research bureau platform, Ohio should be and must be your first ship to pick. Now I will explain the reason why the Ohio should be your first pick for the research bureau. So as you can see, this is the tier 10 American battleship Ohio, and it got released a long time ago, and it's still very powerful. Now we do have a ship like Slava, we do have Irresistible, which has a lot of guns, 16 guns, so there are many choices. But why Ohio? Honestly, first of all, if you want to really do an insane crackdown on cruisers, these guns pack so much punch. 4, or I would say 8 457mm guns, really decent reload time, and the hull that you have on Ohio is a very tanky one, not like the case of, I would say, Russian Kremlin like hull. I mean, Kremlin has 60mm deck, and even the newest tier 10 battleship that they have released, Sibir, that also have 40mm deck, but Ohio still has 38mm deck and side, and also 32mm bow. So it is a really tanky with a very high survivability, with decent HP and a good torpedo protection on the ship. Now if I really compare it, because this is a very important comparison, Ohio has 457mm guns, Slava has really fast shell velocity on the guns, and they just do hard on long ranges against battleships. But here's the thing, the reason why I would prefer Ohio is, compared to the Slava, the survivability and still the gun performance is overall really consistent. Against cruisers you will overmatch 30mm plating, and against battleships, if they broadside around 18, 17, 16 kilometers like Slava, which tend to citadel even at long ranges, and that's the speciality of Slava, Ohio still managed to deliver devastating salvos and really good dispersion overall. Like, you do have 2.0 Sigma, and you do also have access to 6th slot of the artillery plotting room mod 2, which only, have that speciality for American ships. So that is something that really makes it cool. And obviously the armor, the hull, it performs significantly better compared to Slava. Now in the case of Irresistible, why I will not gonna recommend Irresistible, let me show you Irresistible quickly, because this is a bit of a comparison that I have to make. Now this is Irresistible, another research bureau ship that you might be tempted to pick because you do have tons of guns, cruiser level of DPM, on battleship hull. It is supposedly a battleship hull, but honestly, with that insanely big citadel armor, I can tell you, if you are picking the irresistible first for your, I would say, research bureau pick, it's gonna be difficult, because even though it does have come up with gimmicks like smoke and actually have really good firepower, and I would say if you want to farm Ohio versus irresistible, if you are picking irresistible and farming the Ohio at long range and Ohio gets perma spotted, I think you can basically kill that Ohio because of your improved pen of 39, not improved pen, it's just that it is 39mm pen on HE shell, which means that you will just full pen Ohio armor plating, which 1 versus 1 you might win at long ranges, but overall in many cases when you have to push in late game situations and you want that tankiness, well, irresistible is absolutely atrocious. This armor is not forgiving at all whatsoever, and you will be taking huge damage, and you just do not have something else other than the smoke itself, which is a crawling smoke generator, so you can sometimes suffer a lot in survivability, whereas in the case of Ohio, that is not the case. Ohio will tank a lot, have decent torpedo protection, the ability that you have to push is also exist, and you can really use these overmatching guns against cruisers, where irresistible have to rely on a lot of spam with AG and AP sometimes on broadside cruisers. So Ohio will be doing overall better and should be and must be your first ship pick because of that. Now in the case of Ohio, if you are not having enough range, well, you do have decent range, 21.7 kilometer, but you still have access to spotter aircraft having cooldown heals, which means that you have only 40 seconds of cooldown time. In this case, with the help of flags and skills, you get it down to 36.9. So this is the thing that if you are a newer player, you have to understand. You want to get the best of the survivability and also the best of the gun performance, and that is you can get on only Ohio. And even if we compare it with Slava, Slava has really good guns, like insane penetration. That is the gimmick of the Slava, but it is trading out so much for these guns. You can see here 25mm bow, 25mm side plating. This is kind of like the cruiser plating that you expect on a battleship hull. For these amazing guns, really good accuracy at long ranges, but because of this armor plating that it gets like this, and also the 32mm plating on deck, it is definitely suffering a lot from the cruiser and destroyer spam. Okay, and your DPM is not nowhere very good. Like 119 and 95k AP DPM is something that you actually don't have enough. Only on broadsides, only on the players that are dumb enough to show broadside every single time in randoms or in ranked battles, the Slava shines. And especially, you cannot play this ship in ranked battles because there might be good players that are in the gold league. I mean, gold league usually happens to be at tier 10s. So Slava will absolutely suffer. Whereas Ohio should be your golden pick in the ranked battle. It is so good. And I haven't even talked about the secondaries. The secondaries of Ohio is an extra feature, which is so powerful feature apart from the heals that it gets, which I have already talked about. You do have secondaries, 11.3 kilometer range, very good dispersion. It has built-in Massachusetts-like dispersion that we all should know that, well, this whole line, Ohio, Massachusetts, Georgia, these premiums, they are really good, without a doubt. And Ohio also gets that simil treatment, really good dispersion overall on secondaries built in, and if you build it for secondaries fully, you can get absurd secondary onto destroyer, targeting them from secondaries and dealing a lot of damage, and you have 10% fire chance. So what do you want more on the Ohio? It is so powerful as pushing battleship because this will support you. You can set permanent fires or fires on the enemy battleship once it is basically under your secondaries, and your guns obviously are very reliable. Not cruiser battle cruiser dispersion, it does not have that battle cruiser dispersion ellipse, but it is still very good indeed. And the only thing about the Ohio that I would say as a small weakness is that its speed is kind of lacking for today's standards. I mean, we have seen that William Dearest, the newest steel battleship, or maybe the ships like the Incomp, or maybe some other ships that might be coming in future, they tend to have more speed than 30 knots. This only with the help of speed flag have limited 29.4 knots of speed. So this is something that you have to really be careful of and have to manage this. because sometimes you need that speed and push in the late game to get the caps, because then there are possibly not destroyers that will farm you to death and you can just do push into the caps, and something that you might be missing in the case of low speed. So this is something that you really have to understand. And I would say overall it's a beast of a battleship. You will not gonna go wrong with any of its downsides, but you will be very not gonna say surprised, but because it's so good already, it's gonna be worth it for your first Research Bureau ship pick. And yeah, if you might be thinking why I haven't even compared the Cecilia to the Ohio, well, you just pick a leg mod Colombo because it's the Colombo, I would say, hull, except that it does have sap secondaries, and honestly the gimmicks that they have given to it is kind of not worth it. And if you pick Colombo with leg mod, you really do not need Cecilia. I mean, it's a secondary braced smoke type of ship that uses sap as secondaries. I do not like it whatsoever for what it does. The role is kind of blurred. It's not really exactly doing what you want. Like, it's not effective in that, so I didn't even compare it. But let's talk about the destroyers, and we do have some good destroyer, like for example the newest one, Hull, which actually can be your first ship pick in my opinion, and also your Vampire 2, which is very powerful, I would say, Commonwealth destroyer. And also we have the Druid. So among these 3 destroyers, maybe there might be one. No, these are only 3 destroyers that we currently have, except that we do have another one at tier 9, but I will not gonna compare it with tier 9s against tier 10s. In this case, I will pick Vampire 2, and I will tell you the reasons why I will pick over the Druid and even over the Hull. Alright, so as you can see, this is Vampire 2, a very powerful Commonwealth destroyer, and I would say it should be your first Research Bureau ship. And the reason why I would say Vampire 2 is good enough for that, well, first of all, look at the DPM numbers. You have 113mm guns that does have 19mm HE pen, which means that you can farm any superstructure. The maximum superstructure plating that tier 10 ships get is 19mm. So you basically full pen on superstructures, which means that your HE pen is good enough. Really good fire chance. Your fires per minute is amazing. If I use the flags, for example, like in this case, if I use all the flags and also even use the Demolition Expert, which is kind of recommended on Vampire 2, well, you can get it up to 10% fire chance and that reload time of 2.1 seconds. With this absurd HE and AP DPM, you will be doing absurd damage output especially on destroyers. If you find destroyer caught off guard with the help of your crawling smoke, which again is a very interesting feature, and also you have a 5km hydro, this gives you a offensive and also the defensive capability, which is unlike, I would say, in the case of Druid or Hull. Druid does have 3km hydro, but it's a very defensive hydro. You can play Vampire 2 as offensively by using the crawling smoke and pushing onto a destroyer, and then put yourself in the smoke again, because you crawl, you have to stay 1/4 of the speed to utilize the crawling smoke. And if you can utilize it, you will be slowing down there and spot the destroyer at the same time you catch that destroyer with the help of your hydro. I can tell you, you can just free farm him to death. And even if the destroyer is dumb enough to push into your smoke and hydro combo, I mean, exception is if there are German DDs, or maybe the Lucian in this case that have 5.5km hydro, then your crawling smoke generator will not work. But otherwise, most DDs will definitely gonna suffer from this combo, which again is a huge defensive as well as offensive part that Vampire 2 gets, with offensive gun power that if you are trying to kill any DD, like if there is any gunboat DD, 1 versus 1, if you utilize your crawling smoke and hydro against him, there's a good chance you will win. 100% you will win, unless he basically counters you with a radar, or there's a cruiser that just radars you and counter your smoke. You will have no issues against them whatsoever. And even if there's a gunboat DD, for example, like maybe the Forest Sherman as an example, because it also have a 5km hydro, so he can also counter you with his own smoke. But the thing is, 1 versus 1, you might be able to win even against Sherman, maybe, if you are using broadside AP. Now, here's the thing that makes Vampire 2 even more special. You have, I think, short fuse time improved pen angles, if I'm not wrong, you can actually penetrate on broadside destroyer with this AP, which if you want to increase your maximum DPM from HE to AP, on broadside DDs, you will get full AP pens, which is a huge upside. Like, you just simply increase your AP DPM to 361k on broadside destroyers, and if a destroyer gets angled, you can just always switch to HE. It's such a great thing that they have given to British as well as the Commonwealth DD, like in the case of Empire 2, that I cannot emphasize you enough. This AP DPM will wreak havoc on a broadside DD. I can tell you, you will just eat that destroyer alive with that absurd DPM. 361k DPM is no joke. It's one of the highest DPM, AP DPM in the game, and also the HE DPM is no joke either. It's almost 300k. So with the adrenaline rush kicks in, and also if you might, for example, use something like Fearless Brawler, just to give you some sort of best case scenarios in terms of DPM, it can go up to like 300k plus, and this can go even up to 400k plus with the adrenaline rush kicked in. And here comes the very interesting part. If you pick Vampire 2 today, or I would say Wargaming has announced the Commonwealth Legendary Commander, which by the way does give you heal once you have HP less than 10%. So if you put that on Vampire 2, that Legendary Commander, imagine how much powerful Vampire 2 gets after getting that Legendary Commander. Now that also incentivize at least me, and also I will recommend you to buy Vampire 2 just for that Legendary Commander. Isn't that is going to be interesting to just heal up some HP? This will give you so much power, staying power because of that heal. And couple of more perks, which obviously once that commander gets releases, I will try to explain. And then you do have torpedoes, only 5 of them, but since you do have a lot of firepower, less torpedoes, I don't think so it's such a big downside. I know that you want to get as much torpedoes as you find on a tier 10 daring, but I still believe that 12 kilometer range, which is improved compared to daring, more damage on the tops, and still very stealthy tops, really makes Vampire 2 torpedoes still worthy, even though it's only 5 of them. And you can also launch one by one, okay, and you can precisely aim to a bow of a cruiser and you can possibly land all the torpedoes, which is again the benefit that you get from the British daring line. Okay, if you are fearing from the CVs, well, you do have the smoke, which Hull does not have, by the way. Hull does have other things. For example, if we compare it to Hull, literally Hull, if you are thinking of buying, for example, the Hull, the thing why I would say Vampire 2 is a good ship is because you have the smokes. You have the ability to farm ships in smoke, whereas you need a lot of experience in the case of Hull itself. Like for example, if I show you the Hull, as you can see, well, in this case you don't have smoke. You do have so many other perks against aircraft carriers and also so many other upsides that I also kinda have to say, if you want to pick your second choice, if you might have Vampire 2 for example, I would say the Hull should be your must and your obviously the pick after Vampire 2 itself. But I will talk about the Hull, but here my, I would say, conclusion on the Vampire 2, I think it's the better pick compared to the Hull. Yes, it does get the Des Moines guns, but it's require some experience. If you are an experienced player and you want to open water farm some ships, which I think it's not easy, because you have to shoot the guns and at the same time speed juking and also try to mitigate as much damage as you can. And even though you do have the super heals and all that stuff in Hull, it can be sometimes difficult to play open water. If you do have that experience, sure, go for the Hull first. But in my case, Vampire 2 is a lot safer, it's a lot easier, and it's a lot sort of beginner friendly, at least compared to the Hull itself. Even though the best beginner friendly destroyer has to be the daring, but Vampire 2 does come up with so much upsides, like for example more DPM compared to daring, and interesting smoke, which I would say sometimes more useful, sometimes not that much useful compared to daring's short burst smoke generator. That is totally up to you. And also, by the way, very competitive concealment, like very competitive for a gunboat DD like the Vampire 2. It's really good. 5.8 kilometer is high, super high sort of competitiveness that it brings into the table. I do not think so you can go wrong with the Vampire 2, and among all the DDs that we currently have in the Research Bureau section, this should be your first ship pick. But for example, if you have a different taste or flavor, or you want to buy something else than Vampire 2 because you think it's kind of similar compared to Daring, and you might think sometimes Daring feels better because the gun caliber and all the performance that the Daring gets, Vampire 2 also gets in its gun performance. Slightly worse DPM in Daring compared to Vampire 2, and you might be thinking, oh, I just do not want to pick it. I want to pick a very unique, still very strong, and very, very fun to play sort of ship. Vampire 2 is also really good, but the hull comes with a very interesting thing that I don't think so any destroyer in World of Warship have ever come up with, and that is the cruiser caliber guns on a destroyer hull. The hull has cruiser mounted guns. And we are talking about, for an American battleship, Des Moines caliber guns. Literally Des Moines caliber with improved AP pen angles that you absolutely gonna broadside on broadside cruisers will devastate. It is so fun to play sort of ship. Your DPM is not exactly like Vampire 2. Obviously, if you have cruiser caliber guns, you do not expect that you will get destroyer sort of DPM like you find on Vampire 2. That would be so much unfair and would be so much horribly unbalanced. So they just reduced that, I would say, reload time to around 3 seconds, which you can also improve if you want to with the help of, I would say, main battery and AA specialist as well as fearless brawler. Get it down to 2.5 seconds, which I would say get its HE DPM to 200k, which again, for a destroyer having cruiser caliber guns is absurd. Now here's the thing that I love about hull. If you love open water gunboating, and if you want to farm battleships with broadside on utilizing this HE as well as AP, it will be amazing. Like, look at the AP performance. And here's the thing, well, you overpen on AP, with the help of AP. It does not have like short views that you find on the Vampire 2. It's not like that, but you do have improved pen angles. And here's the thing which gives so much more powerful value and sort of insane ability, and that is that you on broadside cruisers on demand. Like, you cannot, like, I would say, disengage in a cruiser without shooting the guns, right? Like, you can see here you have 7.2 kilometer detection. On a cruiser, you have to, in order to get the broadside, really have to figure out a position to utilize that cruiser hull and cruiser guns, like with all the cruisers. But in the case of hull, you can literally position yourself by staying concealed, okay, staying undetected, and then pop these guns, 3 of these guns with really good reload time, and you just basically citadel cruisers out of the middle of nowhere. That is so actually busted. Honestly, that is so busted. You have 4.9k AP alpha, or I would say citadel damage. You can imagine how the cruiser will get frustrated once you, in the hull, the destroyer itself, get into his broadside undetected. I don't know, this seems to be completely unbalanced in that regard, and this seems to be pretty insane counter to the light cruiser, especially. Even at 10 to 12 kilometers, you have enough AP pen, slightly, I would say, just slightly worse AP pen than Des Moines. I think it's like the 10 to 15% of the worse AP performance penetration wise, but overall the AP actually shell velocity, in terms of shell velocity, is actually better than the Des Moines, which is kind of absurd. And also one of the very key things about the hull, that the shell velocity is very good. Even at ranges like 14.8 kilometer maximum firing range, you will be very comfortable shooting them. And with this absurd HP, along with, I would say, 4 super heals, which by the way you can utilize them fully, get this total HP up to more than 50,000. 50,000 HP on a destroyer hull that does not have citadel. That makes it very, very interesting and also powerful at the same time. And if, for example, you do not like carriers, like if you want to find a very good destroyer that actually able to counter carriers, and you do have the healings, like healing potential against the carriers itself, like if the carrier drop the payload, you will heal back significantly. You do not need to fear, while the carrier will lose out tons of planes in return. Well, the defensive wave fire and the AA defense numbers will actually gonna help you a lot. Honestly, the entire numbers are not like the Holland. It's not like exactly that, but I can assure you, very much assure you, that if you pick hull compared to the Vampire 2, you will have significantly better experience against aircraft carriers. And if they eat flak, this is a very key and very important thing. You have a lot of shell explosions in a salvo, okay? And also, you do have really powerful damage in a shell explosion. Like, this is really powerful. 2.7k shell explosion means that if one shell, like even the FDR plane, the most tankiest tier 10 aircraft carrier plane in World of Warships, eat the hull shell flak. If it eats the hull shell flak, I tell you, it will be obliterated. That is how powerful they have buffed sort of the damage by shell explosion. Like for example, if you look at the other ships, for example, like the case of Forrest Sherman, you can see the damage by shell explosion is significantly less. So that is the upper advantage in terms of anti-defense that you get on hull, and you do have like long range, 6.9 kilometers, so you can annoy the carrier even more. And you know, it's super annoying, to be honest. If I tell you that as an aircraft carrier, 6.9 kilometer range on a destroyer, this can be very annoying with 6 shell flags and having tons of defensive fire for yourself to annoy the hell out of carriers. And with the cruiser guns, you do tons of damage. You, by the way, have improved HE pen, as you can see, 203mm guns, 34mm pen is something that should be standard, and you are basically farming Conquerors, Republics, or anything like the Burgons that have 32mm plating all over the place. You will basically full pen them if they're angled. So very, very high advantage, a very unique experience with the help of speed juking them, utilizing the speed boost is something that hull actually excels a lot. So if you want to get some different, still very, very powerful experience, in my opinion, not super gonna be good against Vampire 2 itself. Like, you do have worse concealment than Vampire 2 by a long margin, and I haven't built it for concealment because I decided to just make it such that I fully focus on farming cruisers or battleships, okay? But if the destroyer tend to farm you, you do have the guns, not super good DPM, but good enough DPM that with the help of healing, you can fight them back. So it's not too bad. So if you want to get something like out of the world experience, well, I would say hull is very, very interesting. Like, especially when you are trying to farm cruisers with AP, it's gonna be so much fun farming those black ribbons. That would be the most interesting part about the hull. And I think these are the two very powerful options for destroyer, and also the very important one is gonna be Ohio for battleship. Now I would say